Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, severe storms and flooding killing at least 18 people in 3 days across the country. Torrential rains continue to soak states from Texas to Ohio this weekend as more flights face delays and cancellations. A new video reveals the moment before 15 medical workers were reportedly killed in the Gaza Strip, conflicting with Israel statements. Meanwhile, Israel's prime minister heads to Washington to discuss recently imposed tariffs. Stock markets still in shock after the U.S. and China levied 34% tariffs on each other. Is a recession coming, or are we headed toward the golden age of America? Two guests join us to explore what's next in U.S.-China relations. A conversation with NTD's Brendan Fallon sheds light on the connection between the mind, body, and physical pain. How much does the old adage, mind over matter, play in? And cuisine aboard the International Space Station is getting an upgrade, plus a celebration of firsts with SpaceX after a mission that sent humans orbiting over the North and South Poles.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Severe thunderstorms and massive flooding are still soaking the U.S. from Texas to Ohio this weekend. What's more, areas already hit hard by a recent string of storms and tornadoes remain in the path of this current storm system. The storms have killed at least 18 people since Wednesday, including 10 in Tennessee. According to police reports in Franklin County, Kentucky, a 9-year-old boy was swept away by floodwaters while walking to his school bus stop. In Arkansas, a 5-year-old boy perished after a tree collapsed on his family home and trapped him inside. And in Missouri, a 16-year-old volunteer firefighter got into a fatal crash while on the way to rescue storm victims. Data from FlightAware shows over 500 flights were canceled and more than 6,400 delayed yesterday. As of early this morning, more than 70 more have been canceled, with close to 500 delayed. According to forecasters, the flooding could persist for days. Heavy rain is still battering states like Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama, while tornadoes may develop in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. From global tariffs to major developments in criminal justice, the Trump administration was active on multiple fronts this week. NTD's Daniel Monahan has a recap of the week's top stories.
On Monday, the Treasury Department leveled new sanctions against financiers of the criminal Sinaloa drug cartel.
The Sinaloa cartel has invaded our southern border. They have tortured and murdered countless of our citizens.
On Tuesday, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. welcomed two new appointments: FDA Commissioner Dr. Martin Makary and NIH Director Dr. Jay Bhattacharya.
These are two of the greatest scientists in America, and they are going to transform this agency and bring back the revered place of NIH in our history.
Makary had concerns about vaccinations in young children during the COVID pandemic, while Bhattacharya was one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, which argued COVID lockdowns were causing irreparable harm. Later in the week, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth hosted Kennedy at the Pentagon, calling it an honor and pledging to ensure America's warfighters remain healthy and fit to fight. In the legal sphere, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the DOJ will seek the death penalty against murder suspect Luigi Mangione. Bondi also revealed the arrest of Tesla arson suspect Cooper Frederick, who allegedly firebombed a Tesla dealership in Loveland, Colorado.
Let this be a warning. You can run, but you cannot hide. Justice is coming.
Also this week, President Trump announced sweeping new tariffs under the Liberation Day executive order.
It's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country.
Trump says the tariffs are aimed at countering unfair trade practices and beefing up U.S. manufacturing.
If you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney pledged retaliatory measures, including 25% car tariffs.
Canada is ready to take a leadership role in building a coalition of like-minded countries who share our values.
The Senate passed a symbolic resolution to overturn earlier tariffs on Canadian goods, with 4 Republicans breaking ranks to vote with Democrats.
This is a tax, plain and simple. Taxes should not be enacted by one person.
Meanwhile, British construction giant JCB responded by announcing plans to double the size of its Texas plant to 1 million square feet, and EU member states said they are considering countermeasures on U.S. steel and aluminum exports, with a vote expected next week. Global markets fell sharply. Also making headlines, President Trump responded to reports that Elon Musk may soon depart the government.
I want Elon to stay as long as possible. Number one, I like him. Number two, he's doing a great job. Number three, he is a patriot.
From drug cartel crackdowns to sweeping tariffs, it was a week of dramatic moves in Washington. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A quick note on tariffs. The 10% baseline took effect yesterday. That's up from the previous average of about 2.5%. The new baseline affects all imports regardless of origin, applying to the roughly $3 trillion in foreign goods the U.S. imports annually. A second set of larger reciprocal tariffs will start next Wednesday, affecting countries where the U.S. has the largest trade deficits. Those range from a 24% tax on India all the way up to a 46% for Vietnam. That's including a 34% rate for China, the source of America's largest trade deficit. Trump says the tariffs address how for decades the U.S. has been, quote, looted, pillaged, and plundered by friend and foe alike. Exemptions from the reciprocal tariffs include cars, aluminum, and steel because of already existing levies. China quickly responded to new U.S. tariffs with its own duties, implementing 34% across-the-board tariffs on all U.S. goods. And Friday, President Trump delayed the deadline for TikTok to cut ties with its Chinese parent or be ousted from the U.S. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Beijing has announced a 34% tariff on all U.S. products starting April 10th. This is in response to the sweeping tariffs on China announced by the United States on Wednesday. President Trump added a 34% tariff on China on top of the 20% imposed earlier this year. Before the 34% across-the-board tariffs, China had a variety of different tariff amounts on the U.S. depending on the type of product or industry. Trump responded to the Chinese regime's announcement on Truth Social, saying, quote, China played it wrong. They panicked, the one thing they cannot afford to do. Trump has also announced that the date of the TikTok ban will be extended. He said on social media that he'll be signing an executive order to extend the deadline another 75 days. TikTok originally had until Saturday to sell to a non-China-owned company or face a ban in the United States. On Thursday, Trump said U.S. tariffs could play a role in the TikTok situation.
China will probably say, we'll approve a deal, but will you do something on the tariff? The tariffs give us great power to negotiate.
In response to the Trump administration's Chinese import tariffs, nonprofit civil rights group New Civil Liberties Alliance filed a federal lawsuit in Florida. The group alleges that the president overstepped his authority with the sweeping tariffs, in addition to levies he introduced in February by invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And staying on the topic of tariffs, 4 Republican senators joined Senate Democrats to pass a resolution that would block the Trump administration's across-the-board tariffs on Canada. The chamber voted 51-48 on Wednesday. Republican Senators Rand Paul, Susan Collins, Mitch McConnell, and Lisa Murkowski voted to pass the resolution. The resolution does not have the force of law and is not expected to come up for a vote in the House. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
South Korea's parliamentary speaker wants to revise the country's constitution right after a court voted to remove impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. Some experts say his actions went against foreign influence from the Chinese Communist Party. Here are the details.
On Sunday, South Korea's parliamentary speaker proposed a revision to the nation's constitution that's to curb presidential powers. The speaker cites public support for the move. This comes after President Yoon Suk-yeol was ousted this week for declaring martial law last December.
The nation's confusion has come to an end with the Constitutional Court's ruling, but the potential for destructive conflict surrounding presidential powers still exists.
The president invoked martial law last year, saying it was to combat foreign influence from what he called, quote, communist forces and anti-state elements. After this week's impeachment, a regional expert told Fox News that Yoon's foreign and security policies stand in stark contrast to the pro-China figures long supported and controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. South Korea's constitutional court unanimously upheld the impeachment on Friday. One Korean protester said this after the ruling.
This is unfair, and it is wrong. Because in a free democratic country, it's unthinkable for all 8 judges to unanimously vote for dismissal. This happened because forces behind the scenes exerted pressure or caused some kind of manipulation.
A Gallup Korea opinion survey found that over half of all Koreans support constitutional revision to change the presidential system, but the speaker's proposal to revise the Constitution has not yet been approved.
A newly released video shows the details leading up to the reported deaths of 15 medical workers in the Gaza Strip, and it appears to contradict Israel's statements. This comes as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu flew to Washington to discuss tariffs. NTD's Jason Perry has the story and a warning. This report contains footage that some viewers may find disturbing.
Medical workers in the Gaza Strip recently made headlines when 15 medics were reportedly killed last month, and their bodies and vehicles were buried in a large grave. A UN worker was on the scene during the excavation.
We're here today digging up a mass grave of first responders and paramedics. 7 days ago, civil defense and PRCS ambulances arrived at the scene. One by one, they were hit, they were struck. Their bodies were gathered and buried in this mass grave. We're digging them out in their uniforms, with their gloves on.
However, Israel's foreign minister said that Israeli troops killed 9 terrorists from Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in the incident, and that troops opened fire on them because they didn't have their lights on and they were advancing suspiciously toward Israeli troops. But a video released on Saturday by the Red Crescent shows multiple ambulances and fire trucks driving with their emergency lights on. They parked their vehicles and the crews responded to an ambulance on the side of the road that had reportedly come under fire earlier. And this is when Israeli troops began shooting at them for more than 5 minutes. And this video is from a phone that was found in the pocket of one of the men who died, according to the Palestinian Red Crescent Society's vice president. The Israeli military commented on the video and said that the incident was, quote, under thorough investigation. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu flew from Hungary to the United States on Sunday, where he plans to discuss the recently imposed tariffs.
There is a long line of international leaders waiting to meet with Trump in regards to their economies. I think it shows the personal connection and the connection between our countries that is so essential in this time.
President Trump and Netanyahu are also expected to discuss matters regarding the hostages and the war in the Gaza Strip. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Terrorist group Hamas said it fired a barrage of rockets at cities in South Israel today. Israel's military said about 10 projectiles were fired, but most were successfully intercepted. Israel's Channel 12 reported a direct hit in one city. Local emergency services said they were treating one person for injuries. Coming up, stock markets still in shock after the U.S. and China levied 34% tariffs on each other. Is a recession coming, or are we headed toward the golden age of America? 2 guests join us to explore what's next in U.S.-China relations. And the human brain has more to do with how we experience physical pain than you might realize. Brendan Fallon, host of NTD's Vital Signs, helps break it down. That discussion and more in just a minute here on NTD News. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Investor sentiment dimmed following the markets falling to 5-year lows after the U.S. and China announcing 34% tariffs on each other. Some economists are raising fears of a recession as the world's 2 biggest economies battle it out with trade. President Trump has said his tariffs will target unfair trade and boost U.S. manufacturing. Joining us now to explore are two guests, Chris Fenton, a U.S.-China expert, professor at USC and author of Feeding the Dragon, and Adam Savitt, director of China Policy Initiative at the America First Policy Initiative. Thank you both for being here. Great to see you both. Now, the stock markets continue to fall with more sell-offs Friday after China responded with 34% tariffs on U.S. goods set to hit next week. Now, some economists are raising growing concerns of a recession and rising cost of goods for consumers. Supporters, meanwhile, say this is a long-needed step to counter China's unfair trade practices. Chris, starting with you, how are you viewing these latest developments? What is the likely impact on U.S. consumers?
Yeah, well, look, there's a lot of different political posturing that's going on right now. It's really the part of the equation that really needs to be figured out is sort of the cost versus benefit analysis, and that's what we're going through right now. We're detoxing. We're going to see a lot of short-term pain, but we'll also see some short-term positives. For instance, there is a debate over the inflationary spike that we might see, but bond markets are showing quite the opposite. We're seeing oil markets even as recently as Friday in the 61 handle range, which is really going to help a deflationary process occur even in the instance of having some sort of price spikes due to this. So there's a lot of cross currents going on. We're going to see some short-term pain, some short-term gain. But on the backside of this, it's like detoxing. We're going to be a much healthier country, and we're going to be able to bring back some of the most important manufacturing parts of our economy to our states or to friendly shores and really shore up a lot of the national security issues in the process.
Now, Adam, Trump criticized China's retaliation, saying that, quote, China played it wrong, they panicked, the one thing they cannot afford to do. In terms of China's economy, unemployment rates are at a record high and foreign investment is disappearing in China. Given China's economic woes, can China withstand imposing tariffs in response if they are attacks on their own people?
Well, I agree their economy is weak, or at least weakening. And no, I don't think they can bear this in the long term. I think when those 10% fentanyl-based tariffs were ramped up earlier in the year, they had responses that were relatively limited, sectoral, tariffing some of our ag products, as well as fuel, export controls on minerals. But yes, right now they're doing across the board reciprocal tariffs against us. Some economists say that that's a sign of strength, that they think they can do that. I disagree. I think it's a sign of panic. I think it's posturing, and I don't think they can, in the long term, sustain it. Another important thing is that now we're dealing with global, around the world tariffs, and that means they can't use one of their favorite tactics, that's transshipment. So look at Vietnam, for example. They transship tons of goods through there, most notably green tech, solar panels, where they ship it to Vietnam, they repackage it in Vietnam, and they export it. Well, now Vietnam has a big old tariff on it, so they're not going to be able to do that either. They're going to have to get very creative.
A very good point. And Chris, another move this week was Trump signing an executive order to close the de minimis trade loophole, or goods under $800 entering the U.S. duty-free from China and Hong Kong. Now, popular e-commerce platforms like Shein and Temu have been in the spotlight for using this loophole. How big of a blow is this to China?
Well, it's a pretty big blow, actually, because since 2016, we raised that threshold where the tax kicks in to $800. And once that happened, we saw essentially $5 billion worth of trade spike up to about $70 billion worth of trade, taking advantage of that loophole. So both Temu and Shein and Alibaba, they're all going to have to work through this process of trying to figure out how to keep costs contained so that they still keep a grip on the American consumer, while also dealing with the fact that the playing field is getting much more rebalanced, and they're going to have a lot more competition from not just the United States, but also from around the world.
And Adam, expanding on that, Customs and Border processes over 4 million de minimis shipments into the U.S. daily, with concerns over the enormous volume leading to criminals exploiting it with, say, illegal drugs. That's a bipartisan concern, as President Biden also took steps to close the loophole, citing the same line of reasoning as in tackling the fentanyl crisis. How effective do you see this in being to counter fentanyl crisis?
Yeah, so those unmonitored de minimis packages have been a main vehicle for fentanyl. By some measure, it's actually more than over the Mexican border. But, you know, I think ultimately the solution to this fentanyl problem is broadly taxing, or rather, penalizing China so that they act within their country. Unfortunately, it's opaque. We can't control what they produce within China. So President Trump's gradual ratcheting up of the 10% tariffs that were tied directly to fentanyl was the right tactic. And now these extra tariffs will put more pressure on. There's no industry that goes on in China without the CCP being aware of it. A lot of this is being produced in chemical factories that have a, quote, legitimate business purpose as well. And on the side, they're producing fentanyl. There is no way that the regime is not aware of that. And if you needed extra proof, I always refer people to the House China Committee had a wonderful report. They looked at the Mandarin internet, they translated it, and they found essentially rebates, tax rebates that showed that the government is well aware. Some of these translated literally to fentanyl, some of them translated to some precursor names. But we ultimately need to leverage the government of China to solve this problem.
Now, Chris, in terms of the list of countries getting hit with tariffs, that included Taiwan, which the U.S. doesn't officially recognize as a country. Now, this does follow a recent move by the State Department that removed a line from its website saying that the U.S. does not support Taiwan independence. Well, Beijing hasn't responded to that. Do you think this played into Beijing's 34% tariff decision?
Oh, I think it was a brilliant chess move in a way, because it allows us to still keep behind this strategic ambiguity policy that Beijing wants us to stay with. Yet, at the other hand, it allows Taiwan to make an incoming call to the United States to try to renegotiate or negotiate better trade policies between the two entities or the two countries, depending on who you are. On top of it, we have seen incredible allied cooperation between the two countries. We know that TSMC has already committed well over $100 billion to the United States to invest in chip manufacturing here. We also know that these tariffs do not affect the semiconductor chips that are so important to our national security, and also to various components that are in all kinds of different electronics here that we consume in the US. So the supply chain is going to stay very active and very intact between Taiwan and the U.S. And I think on top of it, there's a little bit of trolling on Beijing in terms of the way we handled this particular instance with Taiwan. And I find it quite fascinating.
And Adam, when President Trump mentions Liberation Day, do you see these worldwide tariffs as part of a long-term strategy with China for a global reset beyond trade?
Yeah, these tariffs, the vision of these tariffs is of a different order. You know, you can look at tariffs that are punitive. That's kind of like the earlier fentanyl tariffs that, or the threatened punitive tariffs on Canada and Mexico, also primarily on fentanyl. They want to drive a change in behavior. You can also have tariffs that want to drive towards a trade deal. So looking at the first Trump administration, ultimately that's happened with those tariffs. It moved to the phase one trade deal, which was unsuccessful, but COVID was blamed for that partially. But these are aimed at a fundamental reorganization of capital flows, of manufacturing, where manufacturing is done, how exports and imports are done, the flows of technology, the flows of military hardware, et cetera. This is, we're at a hinge point, really. And I think and hope it'll be successful. And there is a lot at stake in reshaping, really, the global economy.
Big changes indeed. Chris Fenton, Adam Savet, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Coming up, the human brain has more to do with how we experience physical pain than you might realize. Brendan Fallon, host of NTD's Vital Signs, helps break it down. And cuisine aboard the International Space Station is getting an upgrade. Plus, a celebration of firsts with SpaceX after a mission that sent humans orbiting over the North and South Poles. That and more in just a minute here on NTD News. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now we zoom in on health and wellness. What's the connection between the mind, body, and how we experience physical pain? NTD's Chris Spears spoke earlier with Brendan Fallon, host and executive producer of NTD's Vital Signs, to learn more.
Brendan, it's nice to see you.
Great to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely.
So, I'd like to talk about my latest interview that we've just published on Vital Signs. And we know chronic pain is such a big issue in America. Chronic back pain is the #1 reason that Americans are taking workers' compensation. And often the medical treatments aren't doing a lot to relieve these conditions. So it really opens the opportunity for something else to have an effect in these cases. I interviewed Dr. Howard Schubiner. He's a world expert in chronic pain and mind-body medicine for relieving pain. And he's also he's at Michigan State University. He's a clinical professor at the College of Human Medicine. And he's coming at chronic pain from this angle of mind-body. So dealing with that connection between the mind and the body and how these things influence each other. Here he's describing the basis for chronic pain management through a mind-body approach.
Could you illustrate this concept a little bit for us, that pain is created in the brain?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, this is how the brain works. This is really a revolutionary concept in thinking about medicine, because modern medicine, you go to a doctor, you have a disease, you have something that's wrong, they do tests, they find the problem. You have appendicitis, we'll take it out. You have cancer, it needs treatment. Those are structural disorders that need medical treatment. So medical treatment can be extremely effective in those cases. But there are a whole host of maladies where there's no actual structural damage in the body. And the revolutionary part about what we're doing is, and I base this on 20 years of experience in doing research on this, is that most people with chronic pain actually don't have a structural damage in the body to account for their pain. The pain is real. It's not imaginary. It's not fake. It's not their fault. They're not crazy. But it's because of how the brain works. And what you were alluding to, I'm sorry for the long introduction here to get to the answer, but what you were alluding to is that our brains literally create what we experience. We don't see with our eyes. Light comes in our eyes, but our brains create the images that we see. The same with hearing. And when you touch a hot stove, it's not your finger causing pain, it's actually the brain. And so the brain can create pain that is real in the presence of physical injury, obviously, to protect us. And it can also create pain in the absence of physical injury when there's something going on in our lives that might be particularly stressful or emotional. And that is mind-blowing when you see it on an everyday basis.
That is quite the revelation, Brendan. You know, I hear this, he's talking about how pain can actually happen in our bodies or in our minds without any actual structural damage in the body.
Yeah, and he really emphasizes that part of this treatment. The first step is really to establish that there is no structural basis to the pain. And from there, it opens the door to look at what might be happening in the mind, what kind of things might be going on in a person's life. There's different theories that are used to unlearn the pain, as Dr. Schubiner puts it. And as an interesting side note, in the course of working on this story, the back pain that had me standing up, kneeling down, sitting perched on the edge of my seat is somehow gone. And I talk.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's what can come of just thinking about these things in a different way.
Wow. And he also talked in your interview about a basketball player.
That's right. Denver Nuggets NBA superstar, top scorer for that team, had missed 100 games in his first 5 seasons because of his back pain, and had 3 surgeries. This next soundbite that we'll hear, Dr. Schubiner is giving some insights into how Michael Porter Jr. actually overcame his back pain.
And so Michael Porter Jr., his back pain was due to a neuroplastic condition. In other words, the pain was real, but it was generated by the danger signal in the brain. And so then the next step is, well, gee, what's causing this danger signal in the brain to be generated? You know, is it that you twisted and turned and you became so fearful of moving that you did less and less and less, and your brain just learned that pain as a learned neural circuit and it just continued kind of as a bad habit? Or was it also due to stuff going on in people's lives? And in Michael Porter Jr.'s case, he had a brother who had a lot of difficulties It's a lot of family issues that was really weighing on his mind. And that was part and parcel of the cause. So we have a variety of treatments for these neuroplastic pain conditions. And it's not only back pain, of course, it can be tension headaches, migraine headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic pelvic pain, a whole variety of things. It can also be chronic fatigue, insomnia, anxiety disorders. So all these things, when they're actually caused by the brain, we can reverse them or eliminate them by lowering the danger signal in the brain. And that may be due to, and we can do that through two main processes. One is reversing the neural circuits in the brain by calming and soothing the danger signal. And another is the emotional types of work that you're alerting to with the expressive writing.
Yeah, and what really struck me about this, I was looking through Dr. Shubino's work, and I noted, I read this account of Michael Porter Jr., the basketballer, and he mentioned journal writing as one of the things that had helped him overcome this pain. And it seems, it's really astonishing, right? Something like sitting down and writing a journal would help someone to overcome their pain. And but when you think about it, many of us, I think, we're so caught up, in all the distractions of our lives and the pressures. That process of kind of cataloging our experience and interpreting that, I think it falls by the wayside a lot of the time. So something as simple as journaling, it allows someone to kind of take note of what's happening in their lives, how that might be affecting them emotionally, because that's a very big part of this. It's the emotional things that are playing out as physical pain.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly notice, in the news industry, especially with the new Trump administration, keeping all the reporters in the world working, maybe overtime, a lot of pressure building up over the past few weeks. And actually, I had some pain in my neck and back, and a friend said, try relaxing.
Yeah, that's it. That's so true. And when you kind of step back a little bit, and if you don't have that expectation, there's something wrong with me. I must have done some damage. And that's why this focuses on eliminating the structural basis, saying there's no structural basis. If you know there isn't something structural there, it gives you that space, I think, to kind of step back and what am I doing that might actually be causing this? What's going on in my mind that might be contributing to this?
Well, I think our audience, everyone can probably benefit from hearing this message about taking some kind of control of the pain and anxiety in their lives. Brendan Fallon, thank you so much.
For more details, check out NTD's Vital Signs with Brendan Fallon. The program zooms in on health and wellness in everyday life, connecting the dots for the big picture of our composite health. Find it on epictv.com by clicking the Talk Shows tab. Engineers at Northwestern University have developed an ingenious device. It's a tiny pacemaker that's smaller than a grain of rice, designed with the tiniest patients in mind, newborn babies. Science journal Nature reported that the pacemaker is light activated, small enough to fit inside a syringe, and can be non-invasively injected into the body. A pacemaker of this kind is well suited for newborn babies with congenital heart defects, but can also be used for people of most any age. Pacemakers are used to control irregular heartbeats. This one is paired with a device that sits on the chest. It sends a light signal to the pacemaker. If irregularities are detected, then the pacemaker gets to work. This device is for temporary heart rhythm issues. And when its job is done, there's no need for surgery to extract it. The device simply dissolves safely into the body's fluids when no longer needed. Coming up, cuisine aboard the International Space Station is getting an upgrade, plus a celebration of firsts with SpaceX after a mission that sent humans orbiting over the North and South Poles. And a low-cost way to boost one's health, new research explores a relationship between helping out in community gardens and improvements in mental and social well-being. That and more in just a minute. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. How much crossover is there between foodies and astronauts? A beloved condiment from Japan just became the first ever fermented food in space. Plus, SpaceX celebrates other zero-G firsts and a closer look at the secret of a dead star inside an eye-catching nebula. Here's more on what happened in space this week.
Miso, or fermented soybean paste, is a fan-favorite seasoning from Japan, used in everything from soups to stir-fries and salad dressing. And now it's livening up the menu for astronauts. A Wednesday report says it's the first ever food to get fermented in space. Food in orbit is mostly freeze-dried and devoid of the microbes that give miso its flavor. The experiment proves it's possible to ferment in space, and even revealed that zero-G offers its own unique taste. A portion of cooked soybeans, salt, and fermented rice was made and divided into 3 parts, and one of them headed to the International Space Station. After 30 days of fermenting, 14 researchers and chefs reported that miso had a nuttier flavor when made on board the ISS compared to its earthly counterparts. Over at SpaceX, the company is celebrating its own milestone, the first ever human spaceflight directly over Earth's north and south poles. The commercial FRAM-2 mission brought cryptocurrency billionaire Chung Wang and 3 others into orbit. They safely splashed down back on Earth Friday. According to Wang, Antarctica appeared, quote, only pure white from space. He noted no human activity was visible. The crew also marked some other firsts, like the first X-ray taken in space, and being the first SpaceX Dragon capsule to land in the Pacific Ocean. And in the far reaches of outer space, a decades-long mystery behind an eye-catching nebula may have just been solved. This is Caldwell 63, known as the Helix Nebula, and nicknamed the God's Eye for its striking shape and colors. At its center is a white dwarf, the remains of what was once a massive star, and massive X-rays have been pouring out of it for at least 2 decades. As for the most likely explanation, scientists now say the remains of a giant planet larger than Jupiter are falling into the white dwarf, getting superheated, and causing it to shine in X-rays.
The head of Britain's spy agency just launched a new exhibition of its archive, shedding light on a covert 115-year-old legacy. Visitors can separate fact from fiction in a gallery of artifacts and espionage. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the history of the UK's domestic counterintelligence service.
A new installation in London will provide a glimpse into the shadows of the United Kingdom's MI5. Steve Burgess, head of exhibitions at the National Archives, says the exhibition is an immersive experience.
So together with MI5, we explore their 115-year story, all about keeping Britain safe, keeping the country safe. And as you enter the gallery, you'll feel like you're stepping into the hidden world of MI5.
MI5 Official Secrets has been curated over several years to give people the chance to see equipment and other artifacts used by spies.
You'll see top secret files, personal memos, gadgets, photographs, interviews, confessions, a whole range of things.
This lemon was fatal for a German spy, Karl Müller, who came to Britain in 1915. It helped to convict him because Karl Müller was using lemon juice to write secret messages in between the lines of an otherwise innocuous letter.
The letter was intercepted, marking the beginning of the end for Mueller.
He was tracked down, tried, found guilty and executed by firing squad at the Tower of London.
Espionage is about secrets, both stealing and keeping them. London's new exhibition gives the public a peek into the spy game.
Many people are just really fascinated by espionage, motives, the motives of these spies, why did they betray their country, all those sort of aspects. And the files, if you look into the files, perhaps you can get some of the answers to these questions.
MI5 Official Secrets runs until September 28th. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Actor Val Kilmer died on Tuesday night in Los Angeles. The 65-year-old died from pneumonia. He was known for his role in the Top Gun franchise, along with other movies. News of his death was met with an outpouring of remembrances. His Top Gun franchise co-star Tom Cruise held a moment of silence for Kilmer at the CinemaCon convention earlier this week. Cruise acted with Kilmer in his final on-screen appearance. Numerous others who had worked with Kilmer on film sets or admired him as an actor sent out statements or messages remembering him. Actor Nicolas Cage wrote to The Hollywood Reporter saying Kilmer should have won an Oscar for his role in the 1991 movie The Doors. Before his passing, Kilmer overcame a struggle with throat cancer stemming from a 2014 diagnosis. Kilmer wrote 2 books of poetry and was nominated for an Audie and a Grammy for his narration on the dramatized audiobook version of The Mark of Zorro. One of Rome's most iconic landmarks is hiding something. An underground chamber beneath the Italian capital houses centuries-old infrastructure and modern technology. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details.
The Trevi Fountain is one of Rome's most recognizable landmarks and a major draw for visitors from around the world. What tourists don't see is the carefully managed system of waterworks below. Davide De Alonso oversees the team that manages the fountain.
We are inside the decantation room of the Trevi Fountain. This basin, also known as a distribution tank, served exclusively to decant water to supply the richest families in the area. There was a distribution system of lead pipes that served the rich, very rich, and less rich families. Based on the diameter of the pipes at the outlet, one could tell the importance of the family.
A large hand-drawn register still hangs on the wall. It lists the handwritten names of the families served by the fountain. Back then, technicians could turn off the water if a bill was overdue. Marco Tasson describes the old system.
These are wooden plugs that were used in antiquity to cap fountain basins. Some think that they were also used to cap the ancient counter, the old calibrated mouths, in the event when the user was in arrears.
While the history of this fountain has been preserved, the system itself has evolved. Today, water no longer flows freely from the aqueduct. Instead, 2 electric pumps recycle 33 gallons of water per second.
The Trevi Fountain always operated with direct water from the Acqua Virgo until the early 1950s, when people began to think that perhaps saving water was essential, and the first recirculating pumps were installed.
Before being recirculated, the water is treated. This helps preserve the marble and ensure the fountain remains clean and clear.
We have a complex water treatment system with a softener that essentially removes limescale from the water, followed by a reverse osmosis system that makes the water free of mineral salts. All this aims to make the water as neutral as possible. Operation is fully automated by multi-parametric control units and algorithms that work to ensure that the fountain functions properly.
The entire operation is monitored automatically using sensors and algorithms to keep the system balanced. Flow is adjusted to maintain steady pressure.
The water that passes through the fountain is actually always the same. Because we are talking about a recirculation system, so the same water is sucked back into a channel and recirculated. The water level in the tank is monitored, and for example, with higher temperatures, the water obviously tends to evaporate. The automatic system tends to replenish the water, taking it from the aqueduct and then restarting the treatment process.
The new system keeps the fountain flowing for millions of tourists who visit the Eternal City each year. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Helping out on a community garden is more than just good for the environment. It's also helping the gardeners themselves. That's what new research is finding. It can boost mental and social well-being as well as save plants. Catherine Howell has been working on community gardens in England for 15 years. It's part of the charity Gaia Foundation's Seed Sovereignty program that stores and shares seeds to promote biodiversity. And she noticed it wasn't just the plants that were thriving, but also the people themselves. Each session would start with a mental health check-in, and she found that by the end of the course, some of those scores had risen by 6%. While the sample size was small, it's backed up by multiple scientific studies. Researchers in Canada published a study in December showing that community seed saving boosts health and well-being. Across the pond, studies from the Michigan State University and University of Colorado Boulder show similar results. Community gardening boosts mood and creates positive social environments. With the healthcare system getting increasingly overloaded, researchers say community gardening could even be a good way to fight back against some diseases. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.